The morning Sarah Martinez received the violation notice, she was kneeling in her front garden, carefully planting marigolds her late husband had loved. The crisp October air carried the scent of fallen leaves through Meadowbrook Estates, a subdivision, where every lawn was precisely edged and every mailbox painted regulation forest green. She'd been living here for 8 years ever since David's military pension, and her teacher's salary had finally scraped together enough for a down payment. This wasn't their dream home, but it was theirs. A modest 2-story colonial with white shutters and a wraparound porch, where she could watch her twin daughters, Emma and Sophia, ride their bikes after school. The envelope was crisp, official, bearing the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association seal. Sarah wiped soil from her hands before tearing it open. Violation notice, fine, $500 property address, 847 Maple Drive violation. Unauthorized exterior paint color, dwelling painted cream. Without board approval, CC and our section 4.2 requires approved. Neutral beige only, payment due within 30 days or face additional penalties. Sarah stared at the letter, her heart hammering. The house had been painted cream when they bought it. She'd never changed a thing. Mommy, what's wrong? 8-year-old Emma had appeared beside her, backpack still slung over her shoulder from the school bus. Nothing. Sweetheart, go inside and start your homework. But it wasn't nothing. That evening, after the girls were asleep, Sarah pulled out the thick binder of HOA documents from closing. She'd never read them thoroughly. Who did? Her fingers traced the CC and her regulations until she found Section 4. 2. All exterior paint must be pre-approved neutral beige, Benjamin Moore number HC96, or colonial white, Benjamin Moore #OC-17 closing parenthesis. The house was definitely cream, not beige, but it had been cream for 8 years. The next morning, Sarah knocked on her neighbor Jeanne Fitzgerald's door. Jeanne had lived in Meadowbrook for 15 years and served her terms on the whole board. If anyone would understand this mess, it would be Jeanne. Oh, honey, Jeanne said, inviting Sarah in for coffee. I heard about the notice, the new board. They're different, very aggressive about enforcement. But Jeanne, the house has been cream since we moved in. Why is this suddenly a problem? Jeanne stirred her coffee slowly, avoiding eye contact. Well, the board voted to strictly enforce all existing violations. They hired a management company, Pinnacle Property Services, to conduct neighborhood audits. Existing violations. But we bought it this color. I know, dear, but technically, if the previous owners painted without approval, Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October morning. Jeanne, you were on the board when we bought the house. Did anyone ever mention this was a violation? Jeanette's silence was answer enough. That afternoon, Sarah called the HOA management company. The receptionist transferred her 3 times before she reached someone who claimed authority to discuss violations. Mrs. Martinez, I'm looking at your file. The violation is clear. Your home's exterior paint doesn't comply with current regulations. Current regulations? The house has been this color for 8 years. I understand your frustration, but the HOA has a duty to maintain property values and aesthetic standards. You have 23 days remaining to remedy the violation or face additional fines. What additional fines? $50 per day until compliance is achieved. Sarah's hands shook as she hung up. At $50 a day, they could lose the house. That evening, she drove through the neighborhood with fresh eyes. 3 houses on Elm Street were painted shades that looked distinctly more cream than beige. 2 houses on Oak Drive had shutters in colors she couldn't find anywhere in the CC and her manual. Why was she being singled out? Her phone rang. A known number. Double quotes. Mrs. Martinez. This is Tom Bradley. I live over on Pine Street. I heard through the grapevine about your paint violation. How did you? Listen, can we meet? I got hit with something similar last month. I think we need to talk. They met at the coffee shop just outside Meadowbrook's gates. Tom was a soft-spoken man in his 60s, wearing the kind of worn flannel shirt that suggested he worked with his hands. They fined me $1,200, he said without preamble. Claimed my fence was 6 inches too high. $1,200? The fence was there when I bought the house 15 years ago. Same as your paint situation. Tom leaned forward. Mrs. Martinez, I measured every fence in the subdivision. Mine's the same height as 30% of the others, but I'm the only one who got fined. Sarah felt sick. Why would they target specific people? That's what I'm trying to figure out. But I started asking around, and there's a pattern. Single Parents, elderly folks, people who can't afford lawyers. They're going after the vulnerable. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the quiet street, when she noticed something odd. A white sedan was parked across the street, engine off, but someone sitting inside, at 2 a.m. The next morning, she found Jeanette Fitzgerald waiting by her mailbox. "Sarah, I need to tell you something." Jeanette's usual warm demeanor had vanished. "The board meeting is tonight. They're discussing your case. I thought I had 3 more weeks to respond." "You do, but they're talking about escalating the legal action, fast-tracking it." Jeanette glanced around nervously. "There are things happening in this neighborhood that aren't right. Be careful who you trust." Before Sarah could respond, Jeanette hurried away. That evening, Sarah sat in the back row of the community center, listening to the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board meeting. The 5 board members sat behind a folding table like judges. President Richard Castellanos, a sharp-dressed man who'd moved to the neighborhood just 2 years ago, called the meeting to order. Item 7 on tonight's agenda, 847 Maple Drive violation enforcement. Sarah's stomach dropped. Her case wasn't supposed to be on the agenda. "The homeowner has been unresponsive to our violation notice," Castellanos announced to the room of perhaps 20 neighbors. "We recommend immediate legal action to protect the community's standards." Sarah shot to her feet. "That's not true. I've been in constant communication with your management company." Castellanos barely glanced at her. "Ma'am, please hold questions until the comment period. This is about my home. I have the right to respond." Board member Patricia Wells, whom Sarah had met at numerous school functions, spoke up. "Sarah, we're just trying to maintain property values for everyone." The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Patricia knew her daughters, had brought casseroles when David died. "The violation is clear-cut," Castellanos continued. "I motion to authorize our legal counsel to pursue immediate action." "Seconded," said Wells without hesitation. Sarah watched in horror as the board voted for DeWan to sue her. Only board member Michael Torres voted no, and he looked uncomfortable about the whole proceeding. As the meeting adjourned, Sarah approached Torres in the parking lot. "Mr. Torres, can I ask why you voted against legal action?" Torres looked around nervously. "Mrs. Martinez, I can't say much, but if I were you, I'd get a lawyer, a good one, and I'd ask that lawyer to look very carefully at your property deed." "My deed? Why?" But Torres was already walking away. "Just trust me on this one." 2 days later, a process server knocked on Sarah's door while she was helping the twins with homework. Emma burst into tears at the sight of the official papers. Sophia just stared. Too young to understand, but old enough to sense something was terribly wrong. The lawsuit demanded immediate compliance with HOA regulations, $2,500 in fines and attorney's fees. If she lost, she could face foreclosure. Sarah sank onto her couch, holding her daughters close. She'd fought for years to build stability after David's death. Now, overpaying that had been on the house when she bought it, she could lose everything. But as she looked at Emma and Sophia's worried faces, something hardened inside her. She buried a husband who died serving his country. She worked 3 jobs to keep this house. She wasn't going down without a fight. The war for Meadowbrook Estates was about to begin. Sarah Martinez had never hired a lawyer before. The yellow pages felt archaic in her hands as she searched for attorneys who might take her case. Most wanted retainers she couldn't afford. Others dismissed HOA disputes as neighborly squabbles not worth their time. It was Tom Bradley who suggested Marcus Chen, a solo practitioner who recently left a big corporate firm to focus on residential property law. "I've seen this before," Chen said during their first meeting, his small office cramped with legal books and case files. HOA letters targeting vulnerable homeowners with selective enforcement. "But your case is something unusual." Sarah leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Board member Torres was right. "Your property deed is interesting. Very interesting." Chen spread out a survey map on his desk. "According to the original subdivision plat from 1987, your house sits on what's called a non-conforming lot. I don't understand. When Meadowbrook was developed, your lot was part of a separate parcel that got folded into the subdivision later. Technically, you're subject to a different set of covenants than the rest of the neighborhood." Sarah stared at the map. "Different how?" "The original CC enters for your lot don't include the paint color restrictions. They were added in the 1994 amendment that may not apply to your property." Hope flickered in Sarah's chest. So I might not be in violation. It's more complicated than that. But yes, you might have a defense. Chen's expression grew serious. However, this level of document analysis costs money, and HOA letters have deep pockets for legal battles. Sarah left Chen's office with a $1,000 retainer agreement and a prayer that she was making the right choice. She'd emptied her emergency fund, the money she'd been saving for the twins' college education. The next week brought a new level of harassment. Sarah found anonymous notes in her mailbox. Paint your house or move out. Your neighbors are tired of your selfishness. The white sedan appeared nightly across from her house, always with someone sitting inside. Then came the special assessment. Special assessment notice: homeowners in Meadowbrook Estates are required to pay $1,200 for emergency road repairs and landscaping improvements. Payment due within 30 days. Sarah called Tom Bradley. Immediately, did you get the special assessment notice? What special assessment? Her blood ran cold. Tom, they only sent it to me. That evening, Sarah attended another board meeting, this time with a small tape recorder in her purse. The community center was nearly empty, just her, an elderly man she didn't recognize, and Johnny Fitzgerald, who wouldn't make eye contact. Item 4, President Castellanos announced special assessment for 847 Maple Drive to cover legal costs and property maintenance impacts. Sarah's hands shook with rage. You're billing me for your own attorney fees to sue me, ma'am. The legal action was necessary due to your non-compliance. The HOA shouldn't bear that cost. This is retaliation. Board member Wells shifted uncomfortably. Sarah, if you just paint your house, all of this would go away. The house was painted this color when I bought it. You know that, Patricia. You brought us cookies when we moved in. Wells looked away. Times change. Standards evolve. After the meeting, Sarah sat in her car in the community center parking lot, tears streaming down her face. She called Marcus Chen. They're trying to force me out, she told him. Special assessments, daily fines, anonymous threats. This isn't about pain anymore. Sarah, I need to ask you something directly. Is there any reason someone might want your specific property? Sarah thought about it. Her lot was larger than most in the subdivision, with mature oak trees and a view of the small pond behind the neighborhood. I don't know. Maybe. I'm going to do some research. In the meantime, keep documenting everything. Every letter, every fine, every threat. The documentation became Sarah's obsession. She photographed every house in the subdivision, cataloging paint colors, fence heights, landscaping choices. She discovered Tom Bradley was right. Dozens of homes had violations identical to hers. Yet only she and a handful of others had been targeted. The pattern became clearer when she cross-referenced the violation list with public records. Every targeted homeowner was either elderly, single, or financially vulnerable. Every targeted property sat on a larger-than-average lot. 2 weeks later, Chen called with news that changed everything. Sarah, I found something. Do you know what Castellanos did? Before he moved to Meadowbrook? No. What? He's a real estate developer. And 3 months ago, his company filed preliminary plans with the county for a luxury townhome development called Meadowbrook Commons. Sarah's mouth went dry. Where? Right where your neighborhood sits now. The plans show your lot and 6 others as the proposed site for a clubhouse and private park. The pieces click together with terrifying clarity. They're trying to force us out so they can redevelop the land. It's looking that way. But Sarah, there's something else. The HOA's legal bills are being paid by something called Community Development Associates. Guess who owns that company? Castellanos. Bingo. He's using HOA funds to pay his own legal costs to drive you out of your home, so he can buy it cheap and demolish it. Sarah felt sick. Is that legal? It's fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. Pick your felony. Chen's voice grew excited. Sarah, this isn't just a property dispute anymore. This is a criminal case. That night, Sarah couldn't bring herself to tell the twins what she'd learned. How could she explain that their neighbors, people they trusted, were part of a scheme to steal their home? She was sitting on the porch steps, watching the white sedan conduct its nightly surveillance when her phone buzzed. A known number. Double quotes Mrs. Martinez. This is Michael Torres, the board member who voted against suing you. Mr. Torres, I can't talk long. Meet me tomorrow at the Starbucks on Highway 6. Come alone. And bring your lawyer. Sarah's heart hammered. Why? What's wrong? Everything, Torres said. Everything about this HOA is wrong. And I have proof. The line went dead. Sarah stared at her phone, then looked up at the white sedan. The driver was talking on a phone, looking directly at her house. Tomorrow, she thought, tomorrow, everything would change. The arbitration hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a gray December morning. Sarah arrived at the downtown legal center with Marcus Chen, her palms sweating despite the cold. She'd barely slept in weeks, and the stress was showing dark circles under her eyes, clothes that hung loose on her shrinking frame. Remember, Chen whispered as they approached the building, this isn't a trial. It's binding arbitration. The arbitrator's decision is final. Inside the sterile conference room, the Meadowbrook Estates HOA had assembled like an army. President Castellano sat flanked by two attorneys from the prestigious firm of Morrison, Blake and Associates. Board members Wells, Johnson, and Martinez filled the chairs behind them. Only Michael Torres was absent. Where's Torres? Sarah whispered. Chen's jaw tightened. That's what worries me. Arbitrator Judge Helen Reeves, a stern woman in her 60s, called the hearing to order. This matter concerns alleged violations of HOA covenants by Mrs. Sarah Martinez. The HOA seeks enforcement of regulations and collection of fines totaling $3,400. Sarah's heart sank. The fines had grown during the months of legal maneuvering. HOA attorney James Morrison stood first, his silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of willful violation. Mrs. Martinez has consistently refused to comply with clearly stated covenants, despite repeated notices and opportunities to cure. Morrison clicked open a thick binder, the Meadowbrook Estates CC&Rs, recorded in 1987 and amended in 1994, clearly state that all exterior paint colors must be pre-approved. Mrs. Martinez's home is painted in an unauthorized color, and she has refused all reasonable attempts at resolution. He gestured toward a poster-sized photograph of Sarah's house. As you can see, the dwelling is clearly painted in cream, not the authorized neutral beige. The violation is obvious and ongoing. Sarah watched Judge Reeves study the photograph, her expression unreadable. Morrison continued, furthermore, Mrs. Martinez has been disruptive at board meetings, made unfounded accusations against board members, and has attempted to avoid responsibility through frivolous legal challenges. The HOA simply requests enforcement of the covenants that all homeowners agreed to follow. It was a masterful performance scam, reasonable, backed by official documents. Sarah felt her case crumbling before Chen had even spoken, but when her attorney stood, he carried a different kind of confidence. Your Honor, this case isn't about paint colors. It's about fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Chen placed his own evidence binder on the table. Mrs. Martinez is the victim of a deliberate scheme to force certain homeowners from their properties for financial gain. Morrison objected. This is completely outside the scope of. I'll allow it. Judge Reeves interrupted. Proceed, Mr. Chen. Chen opened his binder to a survey map. Mrs. Martinez's property sits on what's called a non-conforming lot. According to the original 1987 subdivision plat, her home was never subject to the 1994 paint color amendments. He handed copies to the arbitrator and opposing counsel. More importantly, the selective enforcement of violations reveals a pattern. Mrs. Martinez was targeted not because of her paint color, but because her property is essential to a development scheme orchestrated by HOA President Castellanos. Morrison was on his feet. Objection. This is completely speculative, Mr. Chen, Judge Reeves said carefully. These are serious allegations. I hope you have evidence. Chen smiled grimly. I do, Your Honor. I call Michael Torres. The conference room door opened and Torres walked in, looking pale, but determined. He took the witness chair with shaking hands. Mr. Torres, you're a member of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board, correct? Yes, for the past 3 years. Did you vote to pursue legal action against Mrs. Martinez? No, I did not. Why? Torres glanced at Castellanos, whose face had gone rigid. Because I knew the violation was pretextual. President Castellanos told us privately that we needed to clear out problem properties for a development opportunity. Morrison was on his feet again. Your Honor, this testimony is hearsay and Mr. Torres, Chen interrupted. Do you have any evidence of these private statements? Torres reached into his jacket and withdrew a small digital recorder. I've been recording board executive sessions for 6 months. I was worried about what was happening. The room exploded. Morrison shouted objections while Castellanos whispered furiously to board member Wells, Judge Reeves banged her gavel repeatedly. Order. Mr. Torres, are you testifying that you have recordings of private board discussions? Yes, ma'am, including discussions about targeting specific homeowners to force sales. Chen took the recorder and queued up a file. Your Honor, I'd like to play a brief excerpt from the October executive session. Castellanos' voice filled the room through the tiny speaker. Martinez property is the key parcel. Once we force her out, the others will fall in line. The development can't proceed without that corner lot. Another voice, Sarah recognized it as Patricia Wells. But Richard, isn't this risky? If she lawyers up, she's a single mom with no money. She'll fold. Sarah felt physically sick hearing her neighbors discuss her like a business problem to be solved. Judge Reeves leaned forward. Mr. Torres, who else was present during this conversation? The entire board except myself, President Castellanos, Vice President Wells, Secretary Johnson, and Treasurer Martinez. Chen continued, Mr. Torres, are you aware of any financial relationship between the HOA and President Castellanos' business interests? Morrison tried to object, but Torres was already answering. Yes, the HOA's legal bills are being paid by Community Development Associates, which is owned by President Castellanos. He's using HOA funds to pay his own legal costs. Judge Reeves's expression had shifted from neutral to deeply troubled. Mr. Morrison, does your client wish to respond to these allegations? Morrison huddled with Castellanos and the board members. Sarah could see panic in their whispered conference. Your Honor, we request a recess to the conference room. Door burst open. Two men in dark suits entered, followed by a woman with a badge visible on her belt. FBI. The woman announced, we have warrants for the arrest of Richard Castellanos and Patricia Wells on charges of wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The room erupted into chaos. Castellanos stood slowly, his face pale. This is a mistake. I demand to speak to my attorney. You can call your attorney from the station, the FBI agent replied, producing handcuffs. Sarah watched in stunned silence as her HOA president and the woman who brought her casseroles, when her husband died, were led away in handcuffs. Judge Reeves banged her gavel until the room quieted. Mr. Morrison, given these developments, does your client wish to continue with this proceeding? Morrison looked like a man whose world had just collapsed. The remaining board members were whispering among themselves, looking terrified. Your Honor, in light of these circumstances, the HOA wishes to withdraw its claims and settle this matter. Chen stood immediately. Your Honor, my client has suffered significant financial and emotional damages as a result of this fraudulent scheme. We'll be filing a civil suit for damages, but we ask that all fines and assessments against Mrs. Martinez be immediately voided. Granted, Judge Reeves said. Mrs. Martinez, you're under no obligation to change your home's paint color or pay any fines. This arbitration is concluded in your favor. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. It was over. After months of terror, sleepless nights, and financial ruin, it was finally over. But as she gathered her papers, Chen leaned over and whispered, Sarah, this is just the beginning. The criminal investigation is going to uncover a lot more than we imagined. Outside the legal center, reporters were already gathering. Sarah hurried to her car, Chen shielding her from the cameras. Mrs. Martinez, how do you feel about the arrests? Were you aware of the development scheme? Sarah didn't answer. She just wanted to get home to Emma and Sophia, to hold them tight and tell them they were safe. But as she drove back to Meadowbrook Estates, she realized the hardest part might still be ahead. She still had to live in a neighborhood where her friends had betrayed her, where her home had been targeted for destruction. The white sedan was gone from its usual spot across the street. For the first time in months, Sarah's house sat in peaceful silence. 3 months after the arrests, Sarah Martinez stood in federal district court watching Richard Castellanos and Patricia Wells receive their sentences. The courtroom was packed reporters, FBI agents, and dozens of Meadowbrook Estates residents who'd finally learned the truth about their HOA. Judge Patricia Morrison, no relation to the defense attorney, looked stern as she addressed the defendants. Mr. Castellanos, you were entrusted with the fiduciary responsibility of managing your neighbor's community. Instead, you orchestrated a complex fraud scheme that victimized the very people who trusted you. Castellanos, in an orange jumpsuit with his hands shackled, stood silently as his sentence was read. 5 years in federal prison and $0.3 million in restitution. Patricia Wells received 3 years and was required to pay back $800,000 she'd accepted in kickbacks from the development scheme. But the real bombshell came when federal prosecutor Maria Santos addressed the court. Your Honor, the investigation into the Meadowbrook Estates case has uncovered a much larger conspiracy. Mr. Castellanos was part of a network of fraudulent HOA takeovers, operating in 17 subdivisions across 3 states. Sarah gasped. 17 neighborhoods, hundreds of families targeted just like hers. The scheme worked like this. Santos continued. Castellanos and his associates would move into established neighborhoods, get elected to HOA boards, then use selective enforcement to drive out homeowners whose properties they wanted for development. They'd buy the distressed properties at below market prices, then flip them to commercial developers. The prosecutor displayed a chart showing the network's profits. Over $47 million stolen from homeowners across 5 years. Mrs. Martinez's case broke this scheme open because she fought back. Her courage to challenge what seemed like a simple paint violation exposed one of the largest HOA fraud cases in federal history. After the sentencing, Sarah found herself surrounded by reporters in the courthouse hallway, but she had only one statement prepared. This was never about paint colors or property values. She said, her voice steady. This was about people in positions of trust who decided to prey on their neighbors. I hope our case helps other communities recognize the warning signs before they become victims. That evening, Marcus Cheng called with one final piece of news. Sarah, you need to sit down for this. What now? Remember how we discovered your lot was non-conforming? Well, the title company did a complete forensic audit of your deed. As part of the federal investigation, Sarah felt familiar anxiety creeping in. Your property was never legally part of the Meadowbrook Estates subdivision. Due to a recording error in 1987, your deed shows you own the land, but you were never actually bound by the HOA covenants at all. Sarah sat down hard. What does that mean? It means every fine, every violation notice, every legal action against you was completely invalid. You were never subject to HOA rules in the first place. Sarah started laughing not from humor, but from the absurd irony of it all. She'd spent months fighting a battle she never needed to fight, defending against rules that never applied to her. But Sarah, there's more, because your property was never legally part of the HOA, and because the HOA spent nearly $200,000 in legal fees targeting you specifically, you're entitled to significant damages. How significant? The settlement negotiations start at $2.8 million. Sarah dropped the phone. 6 months later, she stood on her front porch watching Emma and Sophia play in their newly expanded backyard. The settlement money had allowed her to pay off the mortgage, set up college funds for the girls, and even add the pool they'd always dreamed of. More importantly, the criminal investigation had led to the dissolution of the fraudulent HOA board and the implementation of new oversight procedures. Michael Torres had been elected as the new president, running on a platform of transparency and actual community service. The neighborhood felt different now. The atmosphere of fear and surveillance had lifted. Neighbors actually talked to each other again, comparing notes on their experiences and working together to rebuild trust. Jean F. Fitzgerald had moved away the shame of her complicity too much to bear. Sarah felt sorry for her former friend, who'd gotten caught up in something that spiraled beyond her control. Tom Bradley stopped by that evening, carrying a six-pack of beer and wearing a satisfied grin. I heard from my lawyer today, he said, settling into a porch chair. The class action settlement for all the targeted homeowners got approved. Looked like I'm getting my fence money back, plus damages. Sarah smiled. I'm glad. You deserve justice too. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. The white sedan was long gone, replaced by the normal rhythms of suburban life, kids riding bikes, dogs barking, the distant sound of lawnmowers. You know what's funny? Sarah said eventually. What's that? I never did repaint the house. It's still the same cream color that started this whole thing. Tom chuckled. And now you never have to change it. Sarah looked at her house, the home she'd nearly lost, the symbol of everything she'd fought to protect. The cream paint looked warm and welcoming in the golden light. You know what? I think I like it just the way it is. As the stars began to appear, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in over a year. Complete peace. The battle was over. Her family was safe. As she'd learned something valuable about the power of standing up to bullies, even when they wore the mask of authority. Emma and Sophia ran up onto the porch, breathless and grass-stained from playing. "Mommy, can we have s'mores tonight?" Emma asked. "And can we stay up late?" Sophia added hopefully. Sarah looked at her daughters, the reason she'd fought so hard. The future she'd refused to let anyone steal, and made a decision. Yes to both. Tonight we celebrate, as they gathered around the fire pit David had built years ago. Roasting marshmallows under a canopy of stars, Sarah realized this was what victory looked like. Not a courtroom triumph or a monetary settlement, but the simple joy of being home. Surrounded by the people you love, free from fear, the whole wars were over. Life could finally begin again, and the house remained beautifully, defiantly clean.